everybody, welcome back. Here we go. It's part 2. So for this video, so if you followed part 1 of the creating the 2D game, then you'll be all set and ready to do this part 2. So we are going to create our own character controller. We are going to set up all of the animations. So if you remember, our main character has 8 directions with an idle, a walk, a sword attack, a bow attack, a death animation, and a hit animation. So all 6 of those. And then we're also going to set up a state machine as well to control the logic of which animation to play while directions being pressed. All right, so with that, let's jump into it. So here's our project from last time. And first thing we're going to do is enter our content browser here. And we're going to go into the blueprint folder, and I'm going to create a new folder called character. And inside the character folder, we're going to go to a blueprint class. And this time, instead of choosing up here, we're going to go to all classes. Okay, and we're going to search paper. And down here, you're going to see we got a paper character and paper ZD character. So make absolutely sure you choose a paper ZD character and select. And we'll call this BP for blueprint. Call this adventure character. All right. Better yet, let's add just the term base at the end of that, okay? Because we're going to be doing an inherited system. So this will be our character base. So both our hero, our enemies, and our boss later on in the project will all be based off of this character here, okay? Which means anything that we add to this character when we create a child character off of that, it will inherit all those stats from it. Okay. So for example, right now we can go ahead and right click this, and up here we can see create a child blueprint class. All right, so we're going to go ahead and select that, and we're just going to call this our BP hero. Okay, so this is now a child blueprint of this one. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and just save everything. So now we're going to open up our base. We got a nice fresh new blueprint here. I'm going to dock that up here. All right, and let's take a look real quick at all the things that we have included in here. So you'll notice we've already got a capsule collider. We have a sprite asset that we can add. We've got an arrow here to show the direction. And we've got an animation component that we're going to set up today as well, and a character movement. So these are all the things that are included by default, and then we're going to add a couple other things. So now we're going to select our sprite, and down here where it says the source flipbook, we are going to select just the tough guy hero idle down, which will be idle D. We can just search for idle, and idle D will be the idle down. So we'll just use this as our reference. Okay. Now this is a top-down game, so we're going to go ahead and under rotation, and under the X here, we're going to set this to 270 degrees. So now that our sprite is top-down. So to confirm that our hero has inherited this setup, we can go ahead and go over here and we can open up the BP hero. So if you remember, this is a child asset from the original. So if I double click this and we open it up, you can see it comes already with the default sprite that we added in there as the pawn. Okay. So you can see the rotation was set and everything. So it inherited all of the things that we did in our base. Okay, so now we need to set this hero blueprint as the default character. So to do that, we're going to need to go to our game mode. right? So if you remember at the top of the project, we created a game mode. We're going to double click this, open up the game mode. We can do it here if we want. We can also just open up the full blueprint editor if you like. It's up to you. But right here where it says the default pawn class, we're just going to find our BP hero and make that our main character in our game mode. We compile and save. So if we were to go back here now and hit play, you'll notice that we don't have any camera control right now. But if I undock from there, you can see that now my character has loaded into the scene when I hit play. Okay. So now let's give our hero a camera. So we don't need to put a camera on the base blueprint because only the player / hero is going to need a camera, right? So we're going to select the capsule component, which is the collider, and we're going to add first a spring arm. Okay, so the spring arm is now added there, and with the spring arm selected, we're going to add a camera. All right. So the spring arm gives this like standard distance and connection. It kind of like helps keep the avatar character a little bit centered to the lens at all times so that we're not like tinkering with like focusing the camera at the right spot or whatnot. And it also allows us to rotate and spin the camera in any direction we want because the camera will always remain at the end of the spring arm. So with the spring arm selected, we are going to have to set its rotation to 270 on the Y, which will set it straight up and down, which is what we need, right? We need the camera looking down at our avatar. But then the camera is sideways, right? So we're going to have to rotate this 270 on the Z so that the camera is facing the right direction. Okay. And then also the spring arm has collision on it, which is fine for like 3D games and stuff, but for our 2D game, we don't really want it off. So in our details here, we're going to search for do collision test, and we're going to turn that off. Okay. Now we're going to select our camera, and our camera right now is set to a perspective mode, which is great for 3D titles, but we're working in 2D. So we're going to switch our perspective to orthographic. Okay, so I've just noticed that when I hit play, my level seems to be sideways. I don't really want it sideways. Last video, I had you guys rotate the player start around. That might have been a bad idea. So I'm just going to rotate this back in this direction. And now when I hit play, he's facing the right way. So now that we've got all of that squared away, let's go talk about the ortho width. So you'll notice right now we're set to 1536. So again, if I hit play, it's all black and very zoomed out, right? So we can play around with this. I believe that I found 600 to be ideal. If I hit play now, yeah, 600 still pretty zoomed out. So let's go to our hero again, camera. Let's try 500. Whoops. All right, that's looking a little bit better. We can always come back and adjust later. So you know what? I'm actually going to go ahead and leave it at 600 right now until we get the player moving around. We are going to be making the level bigger as well, so we won't necessarily see all kinds of black. But in any case, there we have it. So the camera and the character are now in there and waiting for some control. So let's go to our content folder. All right, and we're going to create a new folder. And we're going to call this input. Okay, we're going to go into our input folder. And we are going to make another folder called actions. And then we're going to go into the actions folder. And we are going to right click. We're going to go to input. And we're going to do an input action. And we're going to call this IA for input action underscore move. Okay. Then we're going to open this up. And if we look inside here, we are going to, right here where it says digital bool, we're going to switch that to axis 2D vector, right? Because we're making a 2D game, and this is going to be our movement control. And that's all we need to do here. We can just save, and we can close this now. Okay, but we got to go back in here, and we're going to go back to the input folder, not inside the action folder. We're going to right-click, input, and do an input mapping context. And if you're wondering what we're going to label this, well, input mapping context will be IMC underscore, and we'll call this adventure. So we're going to open this up now, and you're going to see we have this mapping section with the mapping profile. We're going to click a little plus, add a new mapping profile, and we're going to click here. And then down here, we're going to add the input action that we created. So that's just adding this to this section here. And now we can set up our keyboard controls, right? So for all of you who have played a PC game before, we generally use as our D-pad the AWSD, right? So the directional pad here, we use like AWSD as our directional pad, right? So we're going to need 4 button presses. So we can go ahead and just hit this thing 4 times. And we'll start with D for down. So you can go into here and start searching for D for keyboard input, right? So keyboard input D like this. But you can also just click on the little keyboard icon here and press the letter D on your keyboard. Okay, and then we're going to leave the modifiers here alone. Okay, and then I'm going to press this one here, and we're going to press A. So A will be going left. All right, so we're going to have to add a modifier to this. Okay, so we're going to go to the modifier, and we're going to add one, and we're going to search for negate. Okay, so this means that like going right is a positive direction, and then going left is kind of a negative direction. So by adding negate, we're just saying instead of going right 1, go left -1. It's like an opposite. It's mathematical. So if you're decent at the math, you know what I'm talking about. The next key we're going to do will be the S key. So I'll click on the little keyboard, press S. Sorry, D is not down. D is right. Right, so D and A are the opposites. I've been working on animations all day, and the animation for down is D. Anyways, I digress. So the S key, okay, is going to be down, and now we're going to add a modifier here of swizzle, input axis value. And now the last one is going to be W, which will be the up. And we're going to add 2 modifiers. The first one will be the swizzle. And the second one, you guessed it, negate. Okay? So now we've set up all of our controls. We can save this. We can close this as well. We can close the game mode as well. Now we're just going to work on the hero now. We're going to set up the rest of our controller. So we're going to have to go into the event graph. Okay, we don't need these last 2, the begin overlap and the event tick right now, so I'm just going to delete those. Okay, and then we're going to right click and we're going to search for our input action move event, and then we can open this up and we can see all of the different events. So the action value here is going to be the X and the Y values, right? So we're working on a 2D game. Character moves in X and Y directions, and we want to access both the X and the Y separately. So to do that, we use a break node. So if I pull off of this action value and search for break, you'll see I get a break vector 2D. And when I do that, it gives me access to both the X and Y. Okay, so this little plug, it hasn't changed. It's the same thing. It's just now more specific, right? So instead of just like an overarching umbrella of action value, we have broken it up to do this 2 smaller components of X and Y. So off of the X, we can add movement input. And the world direction here is the X is going to be 1. Whoops, I don't know why I pressed 3. Whoa. 1. Right? So it's just going to move 1 in the direction of 1 on the X value. Okay, plug in the triggered so we can actually get the execution off of that. Okay, we're going to copy this. We can just Control D to duplicate. And we can plug in off of our Y. And then we're going to set this to 0 and go to the Y for 1. Then we need to hook up the execution here. I'm going to do a reroute node. Clean this up. Then we compile and save. Okay, so we've got our movement set up here. So now we need to get the controller, right? So this is why I left the event begin play. So we're just going to right click here. We need to get the controller. Right? We're just going to get our controller first. Okay. Then we need to cast to the player controller. And then we can plug in the event begin play into the player controller. Right? Then we're going to get the enhanced input local player subsystem. Okay, so this weird little node here gives us access to the enhanced input stuff. And then off of here, we can add mapping context. And then plug in our execution. And then in the mapping context, we're going to put in our input mapping context adventure here. So if I compile and save and we go play, my character can now move around the screen. I don't have collision set up yet on my tile map, so ignore that. Now, if you found the character a little bit fast, like I did, with his movement, we can go into the character here, and just where it says character movement, and we can access his max walk speed. And we can cut this in half. So right now mine's set to 600 centimeters per second. I'm going to put mine to 300. And now when I hit play, he's a little bit more slower. Well, a lot more slower by half. Okay. And file, save all. So this is great. So now we've got a character controller that we've made. AWSD is working fine. So now we need to set up the different animation sequences so that if we're moving up, the character sprite looks upward. And if for later down the road, when we start doing the combat and attacks and stuff, all those different animations will work. So we're going to tackle this now. So here's our project again. So we're going to first start by going into our content browser. We're going to go into our blueprint folder, into our character folder. And right now we've got our character base over here and our hero that we started, right? So this is going to start to fill in with, like, you know, if we have a whole cast of enemies in our title, for example, or maybe we have a cast of NPCs that are going to inherit from our character base, this is going to become just a massive hot mess. And if we want to find our hero fast, we're going to want to get a little organized. So we're going to right click and create a new folder. We're just going to call this folder hero. And we're going to move our hero blueprint into this folder. Okay. And now we're going to go into this folder, and now we'll make the animation stuff for our hero. So if we right click in here, and we go to Paper ZD, okay, you'll notice here we've got animation sequence, animation source, and Paper ZD animation DP as an option. Okay, we're going to basically go through all three of these. So first thing we're going to do is make an animation source. We'll click on this, and then of course animation source. So AS underscore animation source hero underscore hero. Okay. And then we're going to double click and open this up. And now you're going to see this source window. So here we're going to get to create a huge list of all of our animations. And then, of course, if you remember, we've got different directions. So whenever the key is pressed to go in a certain direction, we're going to have to set all that up as well. So we're just going to click on the add new animation sequence, and we can start with idle. So I'm just going to right click, rename, or F2, and we'll just call this idle. All right, so let me give you a quick tour of this. If you notice here, we've got the animation data over here. So it's asking us like what animations are we using, right? So we can assign just the idle down for now. It's just to give us the source, okay? And now you'll see that our character's idle is going. It's just 2 frames. Character's just up and down idle, okay? But remember, this is a multi-directional character. So we're going to have to turn on multi-directional sequence. We're going to click this little checkbox. And what you'll see here right away is we have these 4 directions. We have like a north, east, south, and west, right? But our character has 8 directions. So up here where it says the end, that's the number of directions. We're going to switch this to 8. Okay, so now you can see we've got 8 different directions. We could even go as far as like 16, but you could imagine like creating 16 animations or 16 poses or states of idle, walking, attacking, bow, death, and a hit. The amount of work would be astronomical, especially for a solo person. So we're good for 8 for now. Okay. So now all we're going to do here is we can select all of these different positions and align the right sprite for the direction. So here, the up or the northern direction, we can go in here and we'll just search for idle. And then what I'm going to do, just because I'm weird, I'm going to copy this term idle because we're going to be searching for idle for a bit. And now the tough guy sprite that we've provided to those closer to us, you'll notice here everything's labeled like D, DL, DR, L. So this L and R is left and right. D is down, U is up. So for the up direction, I want the idle up. Okay, and then I'll select the next one. And again, I'll just Control V to paste. And now we are going to be up right. So we're looking for U, R. Now over here, we're just going to go right and so on and so forth. So if you haven't grasped it yet, we're now going down and right. So DR, and now we're going straight down. So search for idle, down, and now we're going to be down left. Now we're going to be straight left. And now we're going to be, sorry, I already did left. Up left. And there you have it. So if we look here, as we click, we can see all the different states of our sprite. If I zoom out, he might look a little bit better, right? If I hold Shift key, I can just move my mouse around on this dial and see him just spinning in circles and rotating as desired. So as I stated before, we've got 6 different animation states to set up here. So we'll just add a new animation. And this one will rename walk. Okay. Turn on multi-directional. Switch this to 8. And then, of course, searching for walk. And I'm going to copy this. Control C. And we got walk up. Cool. And then you just keep doing this. Up right. Right. Down right. Down. Down left. Left. Up left. And oops. Up left. And there we go. We can hold Shift and see the character rotating around for walking. Okay. So go through and do this for all of the animation states. Okay. I'm just going to fast forward or cut away here for this part. Okay, so now we've got all of our animations set up. We can save everything. So just go File, Save All. Okay. And our hero animations are all kind of in place. We still have to set up the controller to actually work in the proper directions and so on and so forth. But first, let's go add something brand new. So you guys, those of you who are closer to me, you will have access to a new asset for the turkey. Okay, so we can close this for now. And we'll go back here, and we're just going to go back to our character here. We're going to right click, create a new folder, and call this enemies, or just enemies, fine. You know what, we're not going to be doing that many. Let's just call this turkey. There we go. Okay, and inside of the turkey folder, so you guys will have a JSON file for the turkey. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in here now. Okay, so just like we did with the hero before, we need to go into the textures. We need to double click this guy. Sorry. We need to go into the texture, right click this guy, do a sprite action, apply paper 2D texture settings, and then double click this guy. We're going to go to filter, and we're going to change the default to nearest. Save. Okay, so now that's all set up. Right? It's all stuff we've done before. We're going to go to our frames here, and we are going to select the first and last one. Right click, create a flipbook. Okay. We're just going to go ahead and search for flipbook. And with all of these selected, we are going to right click, asset action, edit selection and property matrix, select all, frames per second down from 15 to 7. Okay, save. So I know I went quick, but this should all be refresher for you at this point. Okay. So with all of that done, we can go back to your filter. Okay. And in here, we're going to right click, search for paper ZD. And we're going to do an animation source, just like we did with our hero. And animation source, AS underscore turkey. All right, and then we'll open this up. We'll add a new animation sequence. We'll call this turkey, or sorry, we'll just call this idle. All right, and then of course in here we're going to look for the turkey's idle. We'll just grab the up or the down. Oops, that's the tough guy. Sorry. We're going to look for the turkey. All right, so the turkey's all set up with north, east, south, and west, which is fine. I'm just going to grab the north. It's fine. So there we go. Turning this on. And our turkey only has 4 directions, so we don't need to set up an 8 direction. Okay, so the north is all set up. Now we can just select this. Search for turkey. So that's going to be the east, south, and idle west. And of course we can check that these idles are good. And we add a new one. This will be walk. once again, just going to walk north, walk east, walk south, west. Again, we can check the walk animation's all good. Of course, we can go save all, and then we're all set. All right. So there'll be another enemy coming later, so you'll need to recall all of this at that point. Okay. So now we need to we've got all of the animations set up with their directions assigned appropriately. Now we need to set up so that the characters will walk in the right direction when we assign them to. Okay. So we're going to go back to our content drawer and go to character. We're going to go into hero. All right. So when we right clicked before and we went to paper ZD, we created an animation source. Right. Now we're going to do an animation blueprint. And then when it's going to ask you which one do we want to make it out of, we're going to make it out of our source hero. Okay. So without the source, we wouldn't be able to do this. All right. We're going to name it the animation blueprint, so ABP hero. Okay. So this is the animation source with all of the right sprites facing in all the different directions properly. This is the blueprint, which will decide what animation is going to play when. Okay, so we're going to open this up. Now, for some of you, this animation graph might start to look a little familiar. All right. So if we switch to the animation graph here, we've got this node for the animation. Now we can tell it what animation we want it to play here. We can pull off of this and search for play. We can tell it that we want it to play the idle, the hit, the walk, and what have you. So if we choose walk, play walk. Okay. And if we compile and save, and if we go back to our hero blueprint, we go to the viewport, and we select our animation component. And in the details, we'll find the anim class. And we're going to switch this to ABP hero. And we'll compile it. If we were to go play this now, we'll notice that our hero is playing the walk animation continuously. And by default, he's looking away from us. Right? So now we're going to have to set the rest of this stuff up. So let's go back to our animation blueprint. And we're going to unhook this. Okay? And then we're going to, off of here, we're going to select animation by bool. You guys know a bool is a true or false statement, right? So now we've got a true or a false animation, which means we can set this thing up now to be we're either walking or we're not walking. So we can have it play the idle animation when we're not walking and the walk animation when we are walking. And we're going to connect our walk animation to true animation. And then off of here, we're going to do play animation idle. But now we have a little problem. We don't know when we're walking. How do we know when the character is even moving in order for it to switch true or false, right? So what we can do is we can access our player and find out if they're moving in a direction, any direction. We can just get their speed or their velocity. And then once we know what velocity they're moving at, we can just say if there's any velocity being recorded or if the velocity is greater than 0, play walk animation. And if it's 0, play idle. Okay? So first, what we'll need to do is access our player character's velocity. So we're going to right click here and get owning actor. And then we're going to get the velocity. And then from that velocity, we're going to get the vector length. So now we've got access to our player's speed and the vector length. So now we can tell if the player is moving or not, which means now we just want to check if that movement is greater than 0. Right? So we'll literally just search for greater than 0. We see here we got this little red condition node, and over here on the bool we got a condition. We can plug that in there. Okay. So get actor, get velocity, get vector length. Is it greater than 0? Boom, all set. Okay, so compile, save. I'm also going to do save all. Okay, so if we hit play, you can see the character is sitting idle, and if I move, the character now walks. And I stop moving, character goes back to idle. Very simple. Okay, but now we need to set up the different directions, right? So there's a couple of ways we can do this. It's not a big project that we're working on, so we could do it this first way. I'm going to show you both ways because the first way is really just good to wrap your head around what it is exactly we're trying to accomplish. And then the second way is a little bit, or rather a lot more complex, but it's much more efficient. Okay. So for adding directionality, we're going to be here in our ABP hero again, in the animation graph. Okay. And between our animation logic and the output node, we're going to add a set directionality. So set directionality. Okay. And we're going to put this in here. So from the animation to the animation and to the result. Okay. So now we're going to open our hero blueprint again. In the event graph, we're going to get to our input move. And from the action value here, we are going to promote this to a variable. And we're going to call it directionality. Okay. And then we're going to set this directionality up here. Okay. So now we have a variable for the directionality that we can use in our animation blueprint. Okay, so we'll go back to our, we'll compile and save first. We'll go back to our animation blueprint. Now we have the get owning actor here, right? So we can pull off of the get owning actor, and then we can cast to our BP hero to get access or reference to our hero to give us access to this variable here, right? So off of the BP hero, we can now search for the directionality. We can get directionality. Okay, so now that we have directionality access from our BP hero, we're just going to break off of this, break the vector 2D, and we're going to split this struct pin. And the X is fine, but we want to invert this number here, right? So what we need to do here is off of here, we're going to multiply. It'll be multiply -1. Plug that into there. Compile and save. And now when we hit play, our character sprites change according to the direction that we're walking. This is technically very inefficient. So when you cast like this, it's not really an ideal way to go. The more times you call cast, the more resource heavy it becomes. Not a huge issue for our particular project, But for the sake of demonstrating setting up a more efficient blueprint, let's explore this, okay? So try to follow what is happening here. So the first thing that would be cool is if we only have to cast to this hero a single time, then we can reuse that particular cast every single time we need it. So to do that, we would need a variable, right? We need a container. We need to store that into a variable so that we can just use that same cast one time for multiple different moments and instances, right? So we're going to go to the event graph of our animation blueprint. We're going to get the owning actors. So just like we do over in the other one, you get the owning actor. Okay. And then we're going to cast to our BP hero. And we're going to promote this to a variable. Okay, so here's the variable here. And we are going to rename this the owning hero. Now we can go back to the graph, compile and save, and go back to the animation graph. And we can remove the get owning actor here, and we can bring this in instead. We can still reference that there now instead of doing it multiple different ways. And then we can bring it in here as well. We can get rid of this cast and plug that in here as well, right? So what we're really doing here is we are getting the owning actor and casting to our hero here. So it's just all nice and buttoned up. We do need to hook up this event here as well. Right. So with this being set up as a variable, whenever we use it now, we're way more efficient. We're technically only casting it a single time. Okay, but we can get even cleaner with this. We don't actually need any of this either. Okay. And one of the reasons is we've got more than just a walk and an idle animation. So if we were to keep this set up, we would then need to like create multiple bools a whole bunch of times for every single different animation. So instead, what we're going to do is we'll get rid of this, or rather copy it. Okay. And we'll get rid of this node here and this. And instead, off of here, we're going to search for a state machine. We're going to add a new state machine that we will call locomotion. Okay. Now, if I double click this, we'll get a whole new tab up here for locomotion. We're going to set an animation state. We'll call idle. So once I have this idle state added, I can double click it. And then off of here, we do the same thing as we did before. Play animation, idle. And then just make sure that looping is enabled, which it should be. All right, and we can go back to locomotion. And then we can create another state. This one we'll call, oops. This one we'll call walk. And we'll go inside there and we'll play the walk. And now we've got a new transition here between idle and walk. So we're going to open the transition by double clicking it and we get to this. And now we copied that one bunch of nodes before, so we can paste that here. And we can plug in that condition. Okay. We can enter this transition when our movement or locomotion or our velocity is greater than 0. Okay. Now we need to go, so now we've got a transition from idle to walk. You can see the arrow clearly there. But now what do we need to go back to idle from walk? Okay, so now we need to go back from walk to idle. We can pull off of here, and you see here where it says create a transition, I'll let go. We got a new transition. Now we need to go from walk to idle. So now we'll just paste that same group of nodes in here, except now we're going to be checking for a not. right? So to go back to idle, we want the opposite effect. Okay, compile and save. So now we want to fix and set our default facing direction. We'll go to our BP hero. So now we're going to grab our directionality, and we're going to set our Y default to 1. Which should now, when we hit play, our character will be facing down, facing the player, and we can walk around, and he faces in all the different directions. Okay, so that's it for this one. We got our animation and our controller all set up, and everything's good to go. So for the next video, we're going to start setting up some combat and enemies, and it's going to get real exciting real quick. So in the meantime, keep experimenting with it, keep playing with it. If you found this incredibly complicated and you really want to understand what's going on, redo it, make it a whole new project, and go through it a second time. It's totally worth understanding all the things that we were trying to do here. Okay? And with that, keep an eye out for the next video.